Hey Jolene, how you doing today?
Good, good. How about you, Kelly?
Oh, I'm doing well. So, who are we speaking with today?
Today is interesting. I'm so excited. I know we say that a lot, but I really got a lot of insight when we spoke to this guest today. Her name is Lori Baker. So, Lori is an English tutor, and I'm just fascinated because English is my first language, and yet I could learn so much from her. It's been astounding. She started out her career as an engineer, and she managed to take that engineering degree that she has and turn it into an English tutoring business where she doesn't just teach English, she actually develops relationships with her students that they learn communication skills because let's go is definitely not the type of English that you are taught in regular English class, right? And it's actual many meanings in the English language. So I think it's so great how Lori has been able to kind of teach people how to speak English and communicate and not just know where the library is, which is going to be
Yes.
so useful for her students. I learned so much and I'm fascinated by it.
No, absolutely. I didn't really know where this conversation was going to go when we started it. And it just went to so many interesting places, like just things I never would have expected at all. And I think,
Right.
if this kind of approach to teaching language was applied across other languages as well, I think it would be so helpful because, I took Spanish in high school. I'm sure you probably took French or, some language in high school. And, you know, we learned basics of getting around a new town, I guess. But as far as like actually communicating and conversing and being able to fit into this new community that you find yourself in, whether it's, temporary, like on vacation, or you moved there or whatever it might be. I mean, those skills are not taught very
Mm-hmm.
often. And I think it's great that she's doing that because she really does help people to connect with whatever new community they find themselves in. I think that's super cool.
Oh, exactly. And I think it's so great said, not just having to know where the library is. Yes, we all need to know where the bathroom is, but learning how to clearly communicate your wants and your needs, whether you are just visiting a country or moving there, is absolutely impressive. And it's been eye-opening to me, this conversation. Like I said, English is my first language, and yeah, we did learn French in high school. Hello everybody from Canada. I can tell you where the library is, but that's probably all I remember. And I'm very excited to play this episode and re-listen to it because I learned so much. But I do want to give a small little caveat. There is a line in this podcast that is not good for little ears. Overall, the entire podcast is very PG, but I do have the mouth of a sailor, so I tend to use it every once in a while, although I try really hard not to for the podcast. In the podcast, I do say that it might not be appropriate before I say it. So just giving you an extra heads up that there's a line in there you might not want your little ones to hear. Let's get started.
All right, let's do it. Hi there, villagers. I'm Kelly,
And I'm Jolene, and this is the Success Through Community podcast.
where we believe that solopreneur success really does take a village.
I see it really as the lifeline.
It's been essential in getting my business to where it is today.
We're talking with women just like you who know that the secret to their success is their community.
Have you found your village yet? Good morning, Lori. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, I'm actually very excited that you're here today because you are the first English tutor. I apologize. Yeah, first English tutor that I've actually ever met. So I'm very excited to understand more about your business and how you say that you're closing the gap between the English we learn and the English that we actually need in real life. And English is my first language, and I probably could still use you on a regular basis. So if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit more about you and what you do and your business, that'd be great.
All right. Well, I've been teaching English to second language learners For 8 years now. I started volunteering at a church here in my area, and then I transitioned to one-on-one tutoring in 2016. I found out that I have a unique specialty because my education's in engineering and not in linguistics. So I closed that gap between what people typically learn as a linguistics style to what they need in how do I talk to my coworker? How do I write a report about this research that I've done? So it's been very fascinating.
I love that. Yeah, no, I love that. And I think I think about, I mean, obviously I'm an English first language, but I took Spanish, right, in high school. And, in the classroom, you're learning all these things, how to get to the metro, it's like, I don't need those things in life. I need to ask you, where's the bathroom? How do I get to the, whatever. Like, I need to be able to converse and have a normal conversation, not these like textbook conversations, because that's not how the people in that language speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you want to know how to persuade people or share your opinion, especially in a work environment, and how to listen and kind of negotiate. And those are very different language skills than catching a train.
Absolutely. Here, we were always taught how to, like, we did French in high school, not Spanish, because our second language. And it was, where's the library? Who needs the library? And, they're still teaching that. And the fact that we even still have libraries, it's amazing. And I love that. But it's not something that we need to be able to survive as a human and as an adult. So that negotiation tool and the learning to listen and to be able to respond appropriately is something that is missing in learning English or any language, actually. So I think that's kind of amazing.
Yeah. And, one example is we say, what do you do? Which is a question about your job.
Right.
But it doesn't say work or job in there at all. And they're like, what do you mean? What do I do? Which is just slightly different from what are you doing, which means right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And the small differences catch people because they're like, I thought I knew what that was. And they're not responding the way I thought.
Yeah, I've always thought that English would be a very difficult language to learn because there are so many nuances. It just so, I mean, your example right there is a prime example of one, but there are so many nuances in the language that the same word spelled different ways means something different. And when you're speaking, I don't know how you're spelling it. So, I don't know what you mean. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
another one that people get confused on is like a business suite, like a set of offices.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, that's suit. And I'm like, suit is something that a man wears in formal dress. I'm like, suite is like desserts. And they're like,
oh gosh, I need to rethink my entire business strategy now. I do have a comment, and I don't know how you, and I'm going to ask you this, Lori. English is not my husband's first language. And this might have to put a rated R on our podcast episode. I don't know. We'll have to research this, Kelly, but he's Arab. He's Arab. So English is a second language, and he's very, very fluent. But he considers English, and like you said, Kelly, very hard to learn. He considers it a bastard language in the terms that everything is pieced from every other different culture and every other different language. Like English was never born of its own tongue, so to speak. And this is way off base and a shocker question for you, but do you agree or disagree, or how do you feel about that comment? Because he says it all the time to me, because I was like, that's not what you meant to say, is it? He's like, oh yeah. So,
That's exactly what I meant. I will say English is pulled from a bunch of different languages. We have so many words that derive from other languages.
right.
But I think one of the hard things that most of my language learners feel is that not only have we pulled our language from other people, we think we're better at communicating than other people.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not.
That may have some of the sentiment in it. So not only like do I end up like just teaching the language, but also I have to cross that cultural barrier of that Americans usually present, that we know more and we want to impose what we're doing on others. And I really try to pull in their culture to our conversation as much as I can. I'm like, how would you respond to this, at home? What do you do in this kind of situation in your native country or the countries that you've been in? Because my teaching is not just about learning English in the American way, so you'll be fine. It's about sharing culture and that back and forth of respecting each other and learning from each other.
Yeah.
About connection too. It sounds like you're also teaching how to connect in a different language with more than just language.
Yes. Yeah. I try a lot to talk about the small differences in the way you make a person feel by using this word or this word. A lot of times when they're just learning the language, they're very, very straightforward and direct and almost harsh, which I think I would be if I was speaking another language every day.
Very literal.
Very formal and yeah. Mm-hmm.
But like I had a student that she was a middle school girl, and the teacher, her school teacher, was like, she's just very sharp and harsh. And I'm like, well, first of all, that's middle school girls.
Yeah.
So, but we can, as she learns more of the language, she can soften those harsh words. Because right now she just knows a word for need. I need that. And want and can I have and later all come at a different rate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's some softening of their of people's perception of them as they learn a language.
That makes sense. Yeah, I love that. So, Lori, one of the things that we like to do, we have, of course, given you some questions in advance so you're not totally caught off guard by everything that we're going to talk about. But we do kind of like to kick things off a little bit with some rapid fire questions you haven't seen before.
Right.
Just to sort of in the style of a little bit of like a word association, in that like the first answer that comes to your mind, that's the answer, right? Not overthinking as we tend to do from time to time, because we've found as we've started doing this that we've all been learning quite a bit about ourselves by the first answer that comes to mind, right? It's very interesting. So I'm going to dive into those a little bit with you. What would you say is the best thing about having your own business?
The best thing about having my own business is that I can schedule to have days off or weekends off. I can schedule when to work and when not to work. Those boundaries are hard to keep, but I can set them.
Exactly. I love that. So then that kind of plays into the next question. What is the hardest thing about having your business?
The hardest thing about having my business is that I'm the engineering side of me is used to knowing all the facts, do everything and do the process. And I've stepped into an industry that I'm learning along the way. And
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable in my path, but there's things I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do an email funnel.
Well, nobody knows how to do that when they first start. You got to figure that stuff
No.
out. Yeah.
Even 5 years in, some of us are still learning about that little email funnel, let me tell you.
It's so I've started using Trello since talking to you.
Hmm.
So it's on one of my cards of things to learn. I'm like, okay, well, funnel is over there.
Yes, yes. It's important, but it's not necessarily the first thing, right?
Right.
But it's certainly important. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
That list
okay.
is longer than I want.
Yeah, yeah. So describe yourself in 5 words.
I want people, myself in 5 words.
Yes.
I am happy, loyal, thoughtful, not thoughtful, but analytical, like thinking through.
Got it.
Okay. So, I would say fun too. Just gonna put it out there.
You can tell by your background, lots of fun. I love that, by the way.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. In what physical location are you the most productive?
At my house, in my office.
Where I'm assuming you are right now.
I am right now, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And what time of day do you get your best work done?
After coffee, but before lunch.
I can agree with that. That is very accurate. I like that. I like that. And then, so this last question tends to throw people a little bit because, of course, there are many of these for all of us. But one of the things that we focus heavily on in the podcast, which you might guess from the name, is community, right? And community specifically around our businesses and just the importance of that as a solopreneur, as an entrepreneur. So we're curious, what is your favorite online community, whether that's like a social media community or somewhere else?
I have been for the past, starting in January, I started being part of the online tutor community, the Insider Secret. I'm part of the Insider Secret Club for online tutors. And I have learned so much from that community, just how to price myself, how to market, how to find tools and things specific to tutors. Mm-hmm. I think you can always get in a community and find what's different between you and other people, but a community to find what's the same and you need the same things creates diversity in the community, and people in a community are at all different levels, and so you can learn so much from people in that community. In one of those communities, there's a subset of video mastermind. And so that community has really helped me to think about videos differently and doing YouTube differently. So it's been a big influence.
Yeah, I love
and
that.
Challenging.
I love that, especially because you obviously came from a very different background than what you're in now. So there was
Right.
a learning curve going to happen there automatically. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
And
I love that the community has taught you so much and has helped you move forward with your business. I'm curious because you had mentioned that you have the engineering and the very analytical background. And prior to recording, we were talking about prisons, and you got a little bit of background in prisons. Not really, but yeah. What sparked the idea to become an English tutor? What sparked you to start this specific?
I started teaching professionals English because I was volunteering in an ESL program in my area, and there was a gentleman in there who was from Colombia and worked in high-rise building construction and tested concrete to make sure that it was cured before they built the rest of the building. And so he was in the class to learn English. Well, we were talking about train schedules, and that was not going to get him a job very soon from the progression of that class. And I realized that I had specific knowledge that he needed, or that could be beneficial to him. So I happened to have a set of drawings at home. So I brought them to the class next time, and we met after and just talked about what all is included, because he knew about drawings, he knew about specs, but he didn't know what they were called. And so he took pictures, and we wrote, all over my drawings with, this is the English name, this is the English name. And so I realized that I had a set of knowledge that most English teachers didn't have.
Yeah, I love that. It starts from volunteering, and one specific person that you helped created a whole new path for you.
Yes. And actually one that adjacent path that I'm pursuing now is that I'm working with a family from Japan, and they have a son. The oldest one is taking algebra in high school. He's in 9th grade. So his math skills are more advanced than the math class he's taking, the algebra class, but his English skills are not high enough for him to know what's happening in algebra. Like words like perimeter and I can't think of another one right now, but just the way we use fractions is different from the way he does. And it's foundational learning that he knows how to do, but doesn't know it when the teacher's just on the board writing. He doesn't understand how to connect that to his previous knowledge.
Yeah.
So
you put the problem in front of him, he could solve it. But if you asked him to solve the problem, he couldn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If you ask him to read, like a sentence, like 2 + 2 = 4, he could not tell you that's what it said. He would say 2 + 2.
Yeah.
What I'm gathering here, and I'm thinking is fascinating, because it's so true and obvious, but you never really think about it, that these highly intelligent people, because I can't do grade 9 algebra, and so obviously he's more advanced in math than I am, and your engineer story of the gentleman who can test concrete to make sure it's safe for building, they are, and their paths are stunted in our culture and in the Western culture and Western world, because their lack of knowledge with the common English. It's not just that they can't speak English, because obviously they have some English skills. So
right.
I see this as, do you use this as part of your business strategy, that you're showing them and teaching your learners the difference between using English as a language and using English as a communication tool? Is that the strategy that you're working on, or?
It is. I should probably define it better like that.
Well, this is recorded, so you can use it later if you need.
Go back. Yeah, so yeah, feel free. What is the strategy you are using? And yeah, use those words because I won't ever use them.
You're like, am I English tutoring?
Well, I
I'm trying to be smart. I got an English tutor in front of me and I'm trying to sound smarter. I'm appreciating
Oh, that's
that it's getting noticed.
Math is really my thing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting too, because it just proves that it really does not matter what your business is. You still have to find what your niche is, what makes you stand out compared to everyone else that's doing what you're doing. You know, I think it's easy to see that in, you know, if you're a health coach or if you're a business coach or, you know, it's obvious that you're going to need something that stands you apart. But even thinking as like an English tutor, it's like, I think that there would be a common myth from my perspective before now that, you know, you just need to find people who need to learn the English language better, like easy peasy, right? But that's not true. I mean, everybody learns differently and everybody teaches differently. And how to make sure that as a teacher, you are linking yourself up with the right student for how you're going to teach them. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting to see that, like, yeah, having you guys have that in common, that background, that analytical background, that mathematical mindset, that you can help them translate that into English. I think it's so interesting to see that.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like, beyond that, of course, because that is definitely a myth I held about your industry. Are there any other myths that you think are really common about your industry that are just not true?
So one of the big debates in English tutoring is if you should be a native speaker, or if you learning English as an additional language helps you teach someone else to learn it. So that's one of the huge debates.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I am not bilingual. I wish I was. I know the advantages of being bilingual. But I feel that if you're high, intermediate, or advanced, you should, well, if you're high, intermediate, or advanced, you're going to live in the US, you need to have a native English speaker train you. If you're learning basic and even up to advanced, if you are using English for work, but you're in another country, you're in Europe and you just need to communicate in English, I think having a second language learner as a teacher is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Because in those situations, everyone is a second language learner, so people are more gracious and tolerant of English mistakes. Where once you live here, people are tolerant of you learning, I think, if you say you're learning, but we expect you to learn the English way if you're gonna, learn the American way if you're gonna live here.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you say that. And I do tend to agree with the different levels of what you're talking about and whether it's good to learn from someone who it was natural for versus someone who had to learn it. Because like myself, I'm a singer. I'm somewhat of a musician. I play some piano, but I have tried over the years multiple times to learn guitar. And I've learned that when I tried to learn from someone who was just a natural, like can pick up any instrument and play it, it was really challenging for me to learn from that person because they didn't have the struggles in the first place. So they didn't understand my struggles, right?
Yes.
So I think, having somebody who understands the challenges of learning the English language, they will be able to guide you around those things in a way, especially when you're brand new to it. But when you hit a certain point, then you need somebody who can teach you those nuances that maybe that second language learner, doesn't know yet either, right?
Right.
So there are
right.
definitely levels of that. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm. Another myth is that anybody can teach English if you speak English. That is not true.
Agreed.
And I am totally surprised. Never, my 20-year-old self would have never thought English and teacher would be connected to me as a title in any way. But I think being able to share what you know and have a passion to connect it to that person helps you be a good teacher. I took some classes about being a teacher, but also you have to realize that as an English speaker, we pick up a lot of it from birth, and there's things that we don't have to practice, like phrasal verbs. My husband, I'm like, do you know what a phrasal verb is? He's like, no. Do either of you know?
No, I don't.
No. So phrasal verbs are when there's a verb and a preposition. So like blow up, or if I say get off, so get off, you think I'm on something and I need to remove myself from that. Okay. What if I say, where do you get off saying that? You're like, oh, if I look those words up, I still don't have a definition.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So,
Don't ever let him listen to the podcast because he is so right. That is absolutely confusing. I mean, like I said earlier, English is my first language. And I think it's even more complicated when we get taught verbs and adjectives and all of that stuff in school. But it's not anything that I really retained until I started to try and write again. And then when I started writing, I was like, well, I need a verb here. Wait a minute, what's a verb? And I'm like 40 something years old, Googling verb, because I want to make sure I'm doing it right. So I can only imagine the patience that you must have as an English tutor, and teaching people from the beginning who are very new to the English language. And like you had said, when you differentiated the United States from other English, being Canadian, I like, even on my website, I'm so concerned with my writing because I use the Canadian dictionary. Therefore, to any of my American clients, I don't know how to spell a lot of words, right? So
yeah.
The patience thing, and like you said, the tolerance is huge. And I think that is something that is definitely needed. And you don't get that just by being someone who can speak English, that's for sure. But what other one piece of advice, aside from be tolerant and have patience with your learners, would you give to someone just starting into your industry today?
I would say you have to have a passion to connect to the person as an individual.
Wow. Yeah.
You have to know their needs and what their desire is, why they're here, and be able to pull that out of people, because a lot of times they say, I need to improve grammar. And that's not really what they need. Yeah. It is part of it, but they need so much other information in that. And I think it's being able to connect with people and help them figure out, hey, you need to work on this and you need to work on this. And the hard part is not coming across as the American. I always, when I start a class, I'm like, okay, so everyone knows Americans are arrogant and know everything. I'm just like,
It's so
I,
I'm sorry, because it's true. It is a stereotype here in Canada,
yeah,
about Americans, and I'm sure it is around the world. And
uh-huh,
Canadians, we always wear our flag with pride, no matter where we go. You'll see our
right,
little flag on our backpack, so people can differentiate us from Americans. And it is
yes,
actually part of our travel advisories. Show you are a Canadian and not an American in specific countries. So when you say that, I can't help but giggle. And it's not, it's a safety thing. I get that, but it's so true. And it's heartbreaking. And I love that your goal is to kind of break that stereotype, speaking with people from other countries and teaching them how to, I don't want to say come to America, that might be copywritten, but teaching them
right,
how to join the conversation in a way where it's not going to be negative at all.
right, right. To have a positive interaction. I'm like, if I was going to go live in another country for 3 years, 5 years, indefinitely, I would want to immerse myself and not kind of be there, but in my own community. You know, a lot of people go and live in their own expat communities.
Right.
And I think that's a disadvantage to living someplace else.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose in a lot of ways, right? Because if the point was that you wanted to be in this other culture, but then you surround yourself with your own culture, then what was the point of moving there in the first place? Yeah.
It does defeat the purpose. And a lot of times it causes problems in families because the kids are not only in your community culture.
Right.
They're going to school.
Yeah.
They come back with, like all kids, different values than your household.
Yeah.
And it's, as a parent, it's always hard to see your child have different values, but especially I think when you see them as a cultural foundation of their identity.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
I do have one thing to share about advanced students,
Yeah.
which is the most fun. So as your language skills advance, you go from concrete conversation to more abstract conversation. Okay. First, you're talking about desk, pencil, bathroom, those concrete places you need. Then at the highest level, you're able to talk about ideas and dreams. And so moving to another culture, of course, people want to talk about politics, money, religion, which are all things, at least in America, we try to not discuss with everyone sometimes. But exactly. But if you're coming to a country and wanting to live in their culture, you want to know those things. And so I also open up to be a safe place to have those kinds of conversations. Why do we think this about politics? Why do we think this about money? Why do we think this about religion? And it's fascinating conversations, but those are the conversations you have at a very advanced level of English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're philosophical, they're values based, they're, you have to have a grasp of the language if you're going to express what you're thinking about something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And to talk about motives or reasons for things, it is a very high level of critical thinking and speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So question for you as somebody who clearly not that long ago decided to take a pretty big shift and pivot in your career path, right? I mean, you started out very, very different. You came into something where now you're starting your own business, and it's a whole different world that you needed to learn and immerse yourself into. What would you say was the biggest obstacle for you when you first started this business?
Oh, this is so cliche, I think now, but it's true. The imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean,
Absolutely.
going from engineering, like I said, to English tutoring, I was like, I have no business doing that. And really, that took me a long time to come to grasp with knowing that I do have the knowledge. I did take some classes on teaching, because I felt that I did need to learn some of those skills. But for people to want to pay me for something that I tried not to do for so long.
So great. I mean, the thing about that is the term imposter syndrome. We as humans, and especially as women, it's something that we have dealt with basically growing up our entire lives, at least in the Western world. I can say that the vast majority of us have dealt with that, whether we're business owners or not. But that being said, we never understood what it was, what it meant, or even the term imposter syndrome until we became business owners. And 9 times out of 10, I would say we learned that from our community. We learned that from the people around us going, you are capable, you are smart enough, you are meant to do this. You're just dealing with imposter syndrome. And I think that's fascinating, which kind of brings me back to, the community aspect of it. And the question we are asking everybody that joins us on this podcast, and I think you've already touched a lot on this, but I want to definitely get you to go a little bit deeper, because looking back on your business to this point, how can you say, and how would you see that your community has helped you and supported you in your success?
First of all, just where I started out volunteering, that somebody even let me do that. That they let me volunteer. And that they encouraged me, that I was good at it, that I had that connection with people. I think growing the community, tutoring is a very isolated from other professionals. It's a very isolating business. You are with your students, but it's not like you're a teacher at school where there's a staff.
Right.
You're just solo out there. Even if you're working for a different platform, you're the only one that you talk to. So I think having my own business has created a larger community. I'm a part of a larger community now, and it's more fulfilling to know that there's other people out there, that I'm not alone in struggling with teaching or business things. There's always someone I can ask questions of. I think the part of community that I did not expect that has been huge has been the community with my students. That I now have a huge international community that I feel like not every country. I looked it up and I have taught 50 countries now.
Wow.
So I have students from all over, and knowing their experiences, knowing who they are, just has that international connection that I think a lot of people need these days. It's not us and them, it's all of us together. One of the, and I think it is crossing borders. One of my students was a mom from Russia, and she asked me, we were at the library in their apartments, And I said, oh, if you want to know what Americans think of Russia, here's Hunt for Red October. Read this. I said, this is where we get all of our information. And she was like, really? What do people think of, what do Americans think of Russians? I was like, we do not believe anything the government says, but we also think that the people in Russia have no say in what the government does. So we don't hold the people accountable as much as the government. And she was like, okay, because there's a lot of countries that have, specifically Russia, propaganda that say other countries are wanting to harm or want bad things for their country. And I'm like, no, not every person in the US wants harm for you as a citizen. That is not true. So
a little hard to convey, because you're right. There are those countries out there that have all of that propaganda that make their citizens believe that the world is against them. And then they want to go somewhere to have a better life. So they understand that there is more potential in a different country, but that fear has to be there for them, and you're helping them. And I think that everybody needs a Lori. Yeah. There needs to be a 6 degrees of Lori out there. And
I have this Russian family has moved back to Russia.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And so at the one of the strange things was the daughter was taking American history while she was here. And she was like, how do you think America won World War II? I was like, why do you think we didn't? And so she was telling me some of the Russian history, and I was like, history is written from a perspective. I was like, this is the American perspective of what happened. It doesn't change the facts. It's supposed to be based on facts, but we're writing from our perspective. Yeah. I was like, your history is from your perspective. And so in going back to Russia and the turmoil these days there, she's very frustrated. And I'm like, remember, there's perspective. I'm like, you have to remember that what the propaganda is saying and what the UN is doing in different places, it's all about perspective. And I think having international friends helps you find that perspective among a larger group of people. Yeah.
It kind of removes that echo chamber of just hearing your own opinion over and over again, because you see a perspective that never would have come to your mind in the first place. Yeah. Yeah.
So we call it propaganda, but every country has their version of history. And saying that it is a perspective is a really, really great way to explain my version of what I was taught happened during World War II is definitely going to be different than what Americans and Russians and even Japanese children have been taught. Like all across the world, it's different. And there's always a different bad guy, right? So having, like you had mentioned, having international friends in that international community and that connection is definitely going to be eye-opening. And I think that the internet is definitely making the world a much smaller place, and it is helping others. But that is even a whole other podcast episode.
Yes.
Well, and so that being said, just to kind of close out this conversation, which I think has been really interesting, and I love these because you never know at the top of the conversation where it's going to go, but
Right.
but I think it's being open to the conversation and learning from different perspectives. I never would have thought that we would have gone from talking about English tutoring to perspective on history, but I love it because it's a completely natural part of what you're doing. And I think it's just fascinating to me to see where these conversations go. But that being said, where can our listeners find you online, whether they need to hire you or they know somebody who needs to hire you, or, and you mentioned YouTube earlier. I can't remember if that was when we were recording or not, but, where can they find you if they want to learn more?
Probably the easiest place is lorieslanguagelab.net.
Awesome.
I also have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I will give you those links, but all of them have Lori's Language Lab in them.
Awesome. And we'll have them in the
not
show
very
notes
many.
as well. So they'll be easy for people to click on wherever they want to find you. Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, Lori. This has been such a fun conversation. I really, just very interesting. So thank you for joining us this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was fun. I love chatting with y'all.
It was great. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you, and we'll see you around. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us this week on the Success Through Community podcast.
Where our goal is to support female solopreneurs through community.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, make sure you check out the show notes for links, transcripts, and so much more.
And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to the podcast.
Ooh, and don't forget to mention us to your community,
And if you can't wait for the next episode, be sure to join us on Patreon.
where our community is made possible by listeners like you. So thank you so much for your support.
Until next time.